A very good morning and welcome to our Technology Game Changers series. It's really my privilege and an honor to be hosting a panel like yourselves. I'm really excited to listen into this engaging and insightful panel discussion on a topic that is not only crucial for the future of technology, but also holds a lot of potential to transform the Indian economy, right? And making India the next semiconductor hub. I'm Avinash, one of the founders of Global Talent Exchange. We are a global platform mobilizing emerging tech talent from global hubs around the world to areas with skill shortages. Of course, India is at the cusp of a transformative journey in semiconductors and semiconductor manufacturing. As the world moves towards a future dominated by technologies such as artificial intelligence, 5G, IoT, the role of semiconductors is becoming increasingly pivotal. So the idea of this series is to trigger an exchange of viewpoints amongst experts like yourselves and see how we are placed as a nation to seize this opportunity in each of these emerging tech areas and tackle challenges that may kind of arise. Also, the industry stands at the brink of unprecedented growth amidst a global shift towards supply chain diversification from China to other countries. With rising competition in the semiconductor chip market, India has emerged as a promising player. And the nation's strategic focus on talent development and investment in semiconductor manufacturing, exemplified by the initiatives like the ISM, which is India Semiconductor Mission, positions it as a key contender in the global semiconductor landscape. India's engineering talent, coupled with a favorable business environment and government initiatives, attracts significant global interests and investments in chip manufacturing and related industries, related infrastructure. The ISM subsidy and policy framework have stimulated the growth of semiconductor enterprise, aiming to reduce reliance on imports and bolster domestic capability. So I think there's a lot happening in this space, and very eager to listen into experts here from the industry to see how we are poised for the next 5-10 years, and how this is going to make a big impact to the Indian economy, and how India is going to make an impact within this space to the global scenario. Of course, to lead this discussion, we have Professor 𝐒𝐤𝐵. He's most of you know him. Professor 𝐒𝐤𝐵 is at the Indian Institute of Sciences. He's also currently instrumental in setting up a 300 crore gallium nitride prototyping fab, and is leading a national effort on TD Fab and Innovation Hub. A recipient of several national awards and honors of high repute, including the IEEE EDS Early Career Awards and the DTS Swarna Jayanti Fellowship. He is an acclaimed editor and lecturer in IEEE transactions and electron devices. Professor's awe-inspiring work has resulted in over 200 peer-reviewed publications and over 47 patents. Some house rules before we begin. Professor mentioned a few. We request you to keep the cameras on through the session unless it's very important to kind of get off the camera. If you have a viewpoint while others are talking, please raise your hand and Professor will come to you. In the interest of time, like Professor mentioned, we'll keep it crisp and short, so that there's a lot that could be covered. So I will, without further ado, hand it over to Professor Mayank. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to GTX for thinking about such a topic which is quite pressing and relevant in the current context. Thanks, Avinash, for the quick introduction and setting the context for the session. Before I introduce the panelists, so good morning to all of you. Good morning to the panelists. Good morning to the audience. As you know, today we gather here to delve into a very critical conversation, one that not only addresses our collective ambition, but also evaluates our readiness as a nation to become a global semiconductor hub. Um, if we, we have in this particular session, we have eminent panelists from 8 to 9 different organizations. We have jotted down very critical questions that we must address for the topic that is of interest today. Let me set the context. As you know, as we stand at the crossroad of technological revolution and geopolitical shift, the global semiconductor landscape presents both unprecedented challenges and enormous opportunities. The persistence of the global chip shortage has also raised, pertinent questions about supply chain resilience, geopolitical influences, and the rapid evolution of technologies beyond traditional silicon. The question is, how do these dynamics shape our strategies, and what implications do they hold for emerging players on the global stage, including, the US, Europe, China, other Asian countries, and also India, as they all, contemplate reforming or reshoring manufacturing capabilities. If we turn out our gauge towards India, we find ourselves uniquely positioned, as far as I believe. Between these global shifts, despite not having a historical stronghold in semiconductor manufacturing, India has a stronghold on semiconductor design, and its strategic geopolitical stance, which carves out significant opportunities. And we'll delve more, on some of these aspects into this session. However, it's worth highlighting that the journey is kind of fraught with challenges, from scaling innovations, fostering robust R&D ecosystems, manpower requirements, talent development, and also navigating all the complexities of policy making, infrastructure development, and, to say the least. If we talk about our strength, it has always lied in our rich talent pool and the agility of, say, our engineering sector. But the path forward demands a much deeper dive into, say, nurturing specialized skills, scaling technology capabilities, R&D capabilities, in-house development, beyond the design to actual manufacturing and innovation. Now, government has ambitious plans, ambitious missions, say India Semiconductor Mission, and which has also introduced many other incentives. Recently there were 3 announcements, so it's a good start. Yet the effectiveness of these initiatives need to be evaluated, and we have to see how we can aggressively ramp up on some of these initiatives. On this note, let me quickly introduce our panelists, and I will then go back to each and every panelist, requesting them to introduce themselves further. So on the panel, we have Partha Sarthi, who is from Micron, representing Micron. Micron did the first announcement of a OSAT facility in India. Then we have Dr. Sudhindra Kaushik, who is from Volvo. We have Mr. Prasad, who is from Applied Materials. We have 𝐒𝐞𝐦𝐢𝐧𝐠, who is from Texas Instruments. Dr. Pradeep Thaker, who is from D-Matrix. Then we have Mr. Narendra Padve, who is from Infineon Technologies. And then we also have people participating in the panel from different geographies. So we have Dr. Manoj Joshi, who is from TSMC US. And we have Dr. Harald Gostner from Intel in Germany. So before I get to the sessions, I would request each and every panelist to introduce themselves, say a few things about themselves and their background in context of this particular session. Can I first go to Partha?
Okay, thanks, Mayank, and thanks to GTX. I think it's a nice initiative to bring together some of the thought leaders to discuss some very pertinent topics that's in many of our minds today in India. I am Partha. I work at Micron. I've been in Micron for close to 5 years now. I lead a department which is technology development, and we have functions of modeling and characterization out here. This is, let's say, connected with the global technology development of Micron. And prior to joining Micron, I was with STMicro for more than 20 years, both in India and France. I've always been associated with semiconductors for almost more than 25 years now. So prior to I did my master's from IIT Bombay, and I did my PhD from Aix University in France.
Thanks, Partha. Can I request Manoj to introduce himself?
Yeah, I'm Manoj Joshi, graduated from IIT Bombay, master's PhD, and then I joined TSMC. So I worked for TSMC more than 7 years, and for the Global Foundry, I worked for around 12 years. So overall 20 years, I'm working in technology development, focusing the research part of the technology. I supported volume manufacturing also last like 7 years. So I have experience of like R&D plus volume manufacturing. And that's all I would say, that I'm very much focused on the process, device, and then its characterization.
Thanks, Manoj. Harald, can I request you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello to everybody here. Thanks for inviting me to this important discussion. My background, I'm a design expert here at Intel Munich, working in this field for more than 25 years. The reason why I'm here is probably twofold. First, my interaction on the R&D side with India goes back to probably 2005, I would say 5, 6, working on projects with IIT Bombay, and continued now with Delhi and Bangalore, of course. Beside this, I'm involved in what we call the European ecosystem discussion for the new endeavors of Intel and others to grow the semiconductor manufacturing in Europe. You might have heard about the invest of Intel in Germany, a 30 billion invest, which is just right now starting also with the building activities. And there we have, let's say, extensive discussion with politics and industry peers, how we set up an ecosystem regarding the talent pool, but also the R&D landscape, as well as the supply chain. So I think it's a very good match here to the discussion. And I hope I can contribute this view from Europe to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Harald. Can I go to Prasad next?
Hi, good morning. Thanks, GTX, for this opportunity to be part of this panel discussion. I'm Prasad from Applied Materials, and my specialization is mainly into the new product development. Have been in the semi industry and display for the past 18 years. And prior to that, I was in the automobile industry, and I know the hardships of converting a automobile hub manufacturing to a semiconductor hub, and also it's a very interesting journey, and yeah, huge challenges. My main thing is onto the equipment for the chemical vapor deposition and physical vapor deposition in a clean room environment. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this dream of India becoming a semiconductor and display hub. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Thank you, Prasad. Sudhindra?
Thank you, Mayank. So thanks, Avinash, GTX, and Shobha for coordinating with so many of us. It's a privilege to be here, of course. So I'm an electronics engineer. I started in video processing with Philips in Singapore, then in the Netherlands. I have been with Philips Semiconductors, Philips consumer products. The reason I mentioned that is, so on the maker side of the semiconductors and the user side of it. And later on in the Philips Innovation Campus in Eindhoven, I used to had the customer program management and the people part of it when I came back to Philips in India. Then I moved to NXP because Philips split itself into Philips and NXP. I've been in technology and management and focusing on innovation per se in our culture, in our part of the world. My PhD is also in innovation talent management, a model to bring in the culture of innovation. Me and Mayank know each other also from IEEE, where I'm active in different ways, and trying to bring in our part of giving back to the technology part of the society, where the tagline is, of course, technology for humanity. So in this context, I'm very keen to hear how we can realize together and put our 2 cents to this way forward. Thank you, Mayank.
Thank you, Sudhindra. Can I go to Pradeep next? Pradeep is from Texas Instruments. If he's not there, maybe I'll go to Narendra first, subsequently.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning to all, and thanks to Avinash and team for putting this together and inviting me for the discussion. My quick background: I am in Indian semiconductor industry for past almost 30 plus years, working in different organizations. Started with Philips Semiconductors as of my first job. After which I moved to Singapore, moved to Bangalore, heading National Semiconductor. At that time, I was heading National Semiconductor for about 10 years. Moved to Texas Instruments from there, leading the distribution business. And from there, I moved to Infineon, where I'm there for past 9 years. My main responsibility right now is we are focused on specific segments: computing, consumer, mainly industrial domain, infrastructure, connectivity. So all of that business, I'm the sales director responsible for that business, actually.
Thank you, Naren. Maybe I'll go to Rajiv. Rajiv is with Texas Instruments.
Thanks, Mike. I think it's a great opportunity to be participating in this gathering. I think I can see all the who and who's of the industry having so much of experience. So I feel myself, I don't have such a great experience, but to give some brief about it. So I started my career in a manufacturing where we used to produce Alcatel exchanges in ITI many years back. So we used to basically, I used to be part of the manufacturing whole process, testing at that point of time. We used to use semiconductors. After that, I moved into Siemens, where I was responsible for placement systems, the whole manufacturing part of it, again, the board part of it. So from user to servicing and sales of Siemens placement systems. And then I got an opportunity to join Siemens Components, which eventually became Infineon. So I was part of Infineon for many years, Siemens Infineon for almost close to 9 years, responsible for communication devices, field application support, and also handling smart cards and smart chips projects like smart card-based driving license and others. I was involved in that. So I also got an opportunity after that to start operations for Atmel, which was a semiconductors company, and which subsequently got taken over by Microchip. And before that, I moved to TI, and where I was initially responsible for handling multinational accounts, all the global accounts located in Bangalore, before I moved into the area director position in Pune, then handling North in Delhi. And then I took an interesting move to move into the corporate affairs, which is advocacy. The overall goal is to how do we make semiconductor manufacturing, design, as well as product design in the country easy for Indian ODMs in the country. So that's a brief about myself. I think looking forward to the great session. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Let me just quickly check with Pradeep. Pradeep, if you're there, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. Really privileged to have this opportunity to interact with very uniquely placed and expert panel here. I'm myself, I'm about 30 years in the industry, in semiconductors specifically. My career is split half and half between the US and India. During my tenure, I've had an opportunity to work in 4 areas of technology domain: communication engineering, processors, automotive, and now I'm in the field of AI. In my career, I've had an opportunity to work for Texas Instruments and Maxim, 2 of the organizations that own their own foundry, and had really a very close look as a design engineering towards the interface towards manufacturing. And apart from that, I'm currently in the 5th startup company of my career. Innovation and entrepreneurship are really my professional focus, and skilling is my passion. So prior to D-Matrix, where I'm at currently, I was a country head and VP of engineering at Marvell, where I had an opportunity to grow Marvell fourfold and grow it out of Bangalore to 5 cities in India, and basically establish the presence of all business units, hardware and software in just merely 3.5 years, 2 years of it being COVID. During that time, I was also with ISA as an executive counsel. And there I got an opportunity to launch with my peers in the industry, as well as on the executive council and the secretariat, a skilling platform. And the exclusive purpose of the skilling platform was that will we be ready 3 to 5 years down the road when manufacturing will kick off, some of the newer technologies will emerge. How do we ensure that across 2,500 universities in India that teach ECE as a major, we can provide a support to the faculty and institute and connect and mentoring to the students. And this is being done through industry volunteers across all states in India except 5 states. So only we have presence in all states of our volunteers and outreach. And one of the things that I personally like to do is I have a mini VLSI museum, which starts with everything from wafer to the die to the package substrate, all the way the layout and a small microscope to see the die under the microscope. And I've been traveling on my own to various universities, and I find that students and faculty both get very excited when they actually get to hold the chiplet, which is one of the latest technology in their hand, and be able to see under a microscope, right? So skilling is my passion, and I'm really having, I consider myself lucky that I got this opportunity today to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep. Really nice to hear. Great. So as we open our discussion, I have divided the whole discussion into 6 different bullet points. The first being the global semiconductor scenario. Then we'll talk about the Indian semiconductor scene. Then India's strength and weaknesses. 4th will be India's semiconductor policies and initiatives. Then we'll talk about next 5 years for India. And finally, we'll also talk about another, pressing matter, important pillar, addressing the talent crunch, India as well as the worldwide. So let's first consider the broader context of the global semiconductor landscape. I mean, recent years have highlighted vulnerabilities from supply chain disruption, say due to global chip shortage, equipment shortage, to geopolitical tensions affecting trade and technology transfer. The evolution beyond silicon to other innovative technologies is also reshaping the market dynamics. A lot of new things are happening, but it also posing, while it gives you opportunities, it also poses challenges for global stakeholders. The backdrop invites us to explore how these factors are influencing strategic decisions in manufacturing and investment, especially concerning the roles of various countries such as US, Europe, Taiwan, including some of the Asian countries who have been in manufacturing and more recently now India. So let's hear from our panelists. I have a few questions that I would come to some of you depending on your expertise one by one. Some of the questions I have, and of course you're welcome to expand. The most important question, for example, is the global chip shortage. What led to all of this? All these discussions a couple of years back, is still a pressing concern. What are the key financial, technical, geopolitical trends which are shaping the current global semiconductor landscape compared to how it was 3 years back, and whether it is the same thing or it's something else? Earlier, it was all about silicon. How do you see other technologies becoming mainstream and sharing the market or the mind space? In terms of mind, we can talk about technologists, the policymakers, as well as the engineers. And what issues, for example, with the supply chain, geopolitics, talent shortage, do you foresee that can hinder the rapid growth of semiconductor sector, which the world demands? And for example, another question I would have is, do you think the US can get into manufacturing shortly? Same for Europe. I mean, some of these countries who have pumped in a lot of money more recently, but can they really get into manufacturing the same way as Taiwan did? If yes, why? And if not, what issues do you foresee? So on this note, I will turn to our panelist. Maybe I'll start with Harald. Harald, what do you think? Harald, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, 2 minutes for this question is really a challenge. Thank you for putting it to me.
Time.
Yeah, first, I mean, let me give the perspective, especially from, if you allow, from the European, let's say, side, due to my origin, and how it translates perhaps also to India and the relation. I mean, first, I mean, my view of there's no current shortage. I mean, we had this crisis a couple of years ago due to this interruption of the supply chain during the COVID time. So that was a warning call. Yeah, but this is, I would say, in the moment not the most pressing topic. The really pressing topic is the perspective of the geopolitical threat, where, I mean, regions like Europe, US, you know it, try to invest, I mean, in an unprecedented way. Europe didn't do this for 2 decades. So we are really have changed direction, how to address manufacturing specifically. And this is really a big change which came up in the last 2 years. So we are really facing a new world of manufacturing and supply chain. Let's say the perspective of society and the politics, how they are handling this semiconductor industry. Complete change. Whether we are able to do so, I will come to this in a moment. What is the long-term perspective about the supply in semiconductors? I mean, very recently, the forecast was increased from, you probably have heard, 1 trillion in 2030 to 1.3 trillion US dollar, due to the enhanced need of AI components. So it's a massive growth from today's about 500 billion. I think this is where everybody is counting on, that we have invest into the manufacturing landscape really pays back. I mean, this is something which is long-term. Everybody knows invest into the manufacturing is a 4 to 5 year business. And a lot of this, I mean, add-on market is due to AI, which is related to the very advanced technology nodes. Yeah. So which is highest invest, of course. We are talking about our own invest in Magdeburg of Intel is 30 billion. I mean, if you count the whole invest of Intel in this technology worldwide, we are probably close to 80 billion. These are numbers which are mind-boggling. Yeah. And I mean, a couple of years ago, everybody I know would have said that it's absolutely crazy. But this is, I mean, in line with other companies investing in this field. Yeah. And this also puts some relation to or some other perspective to the numbers which are out in the US CHIPS Act and the European CHIPS Act, which is, you know, 50 and 52 billion in US and 43 billion euro in Europe. I mean, these look like big numbers, but as you already pointed out in your question, does it enable this region to grow to the level where, I mean, Taiwan and Korea is? It's an open question. So it's definitely not just done by even if these numbers are mind-boggling, they are probably not sufficient to catch up here. Yeah. So this is something which is very, very difficult to communicate to politics also, because it's a huge step to the past. Yeah. But catching up in the race, let's say in the global race, it's not a big number. So that's one thing which is very difficult, and we need to have the collaboration between industry and the governments and the regions among. I mean, we are talking right now between US and Europe, but perhaps also other regions, really to build up a kind of a supply chain which is capable to gain a relative high or higher share of this global market of 1.3 trillion. So I think we are in a critical state, and we are not yet sure whether we can achieve it even with this large invest. This is one side. The other side, which is probably really related to the discussion here, is, and I really suffer in my discussions with the ministries, it's not understood that this goes with a huge invest, has to go with a huge invest into talent education. Right now, we have a talent education program in Europe, which is tailored towards the old way of dealing with semiconductor manufacturing, just buying it from somewhere else. Yeah. So the education system produces very low numbers. We have, for example, in whole Germany, we have in terms of microelectronics engineer masters every year in the order below 1,000. Yeah. So which is really not matching what we need in 5 to 6 years. And this is there, let's say the inertia of the system is very high. You have, of course, to build up curricula, you have to build up education structures, and this needs to be done now. And this is the biggest challenge I personally see for Europe, that we are not able to catch up, even if we have this 30 billion invest, to really to perform to the goal, to increase the market share and increase the sovereignty of the geo in Europe, which is the main motivation for the politicians to invest right now. And I think this relates probably also closely to India, because there's also a lot of interest of Europe to collaborate with India, specifically also in the field of talents, to tackle this general problems. A big change in a nutshell, big change within years, huge invest, and we are still in an let's say foggy sea to find the direction how we can build up these talents and how we organize, let's say at the end also, that's the other side, the supply chain. So we are big invest, but I mean, what it's, let's say, built as construction, there is a plan, but how to build up the ecosystem, a lot of things have to be done. That, let's say, my few cents to this topic.
Thank you, Harald. Great points. One of the very interesting thing that you said, that even just from Intel, it is $80 billion worldwide, majority in US and Europe, and other companies are also investing similar. Still, this is not enough. I'll come back to this point later. I have a follow-up question, but let me first go to Manoj from TSMC in US, who is also witnessing a lot of TSMC efforts in US. Manoj?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the first point that you're interested in hearing is about the global chip shortage. And I would say now currently the situation is much better. There is no such type of shortage we are sensing in the market. Most of the foundries worldwide, I would say, they position themselves in order to meet the demand of the market, not only for a near future, but I would say, let's say, for a decade. So I won't worry too much of like a chip shortage kind of situation. Whatever was happened in COVID era, it was not a natural because most of the fabless companies started building the inventories out of the fear, and that was the result of that shortage. So the most important thing, what we would like to understand is where the semiconductor market is going. And if you look at the history, last 50 years of history, the market, as on today, the market is roughly like 500 to 600 billion. And then for the next 10 years, let's say 2030, we are predicting like over 1 trillion. So it's kind of an exponential growth that is predicted there. And then what is basically driving this exponential growth? And then one of the key area that everybody recognizes right now is the AI growth. AI and then associated, like, let's say 3D IC chiplet best approach everybody is going for. And so it is basically having a growth rate, let's say CAGR of 42% until like 2030. So this is kind of a huge growth, and then foundries and across the world, semiconductor industry has to meet this growth. Now, if you look at the geopolitical landscape, I would say even after the US restrictions, the China market is significantly expanding. And as a witness, if you just look at the ASML last like a Q1 sales, you would see it's a 50% of their total sale is in China. What that means is even after the restrictions, US restrictions, that market is pretty expanding. And then thereafter there is South Korea and then Taiwan and then US comes later. So we need to understand where the market is growing, especially. And in terms of diversification, all the foundries, let's say TSMC or even Intel, Samsung, and so on, they are also positioning themselves in different places in the world. You might have heard TSMC announce the fab in Japan, and it's up and running. The first phase is done in US and then Germany and so on. Intel also did the same thing, and many of the other countries are following, like India. So I would say in terms of geopolitical landscape, this semiconductor market is now getting spread. It is not concentrated. It is not going to be concentrated in the future in certain areas, but it will be diversifying across the world. And in terms of technical landscape, I would say it's not the growth only for the logic technology. If you look at the market, it's growing for logic, memories, photonics, packaging, GaN, silicon carbide, image sensors, and so on. So what that means is it's kind of a natural demand from the society in terms of like for the semiconductor industry, and it's quite a healthy demand, I would say. So no matter which part of the semiconductor someone is thinking of investing or working, I'm sure it will have a bright future. So that's my 2 cents on this topic, I would say.
Thank you, Manoj. And particularly thanks for the positive note that it's spreading and it's not going to be equally concerning as it was a couple of years back. On this note, let me go to Narendra and then Sudhindra and then Rajiv to quickly comment on the same topic and how they perceive it while being in India and seeing the development from the Indian side, the global development from the Indian side. So, Narendra?
You're on mute. Professor Pradeep also had raised his hand, so you may want to kind of.
Okay, maybe I can go to Sudhindra then.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was clear from the global perspective. If you see from an Indian context, we have had a rich history, right, from TI and starting very early to the other companies who have been working on this space in let's say maybe we started with application middleware more, but then we are very clearly established, like Pradeep mentioned, around drivers and very close to working with the hardware. So I visualize this as a more of a pyramid, where at the base is the possibilities of a chip, and at the top is where the application of the semiconductor is there. So from this context, I do still feel that, of course, we have wonderful comments that came in how we are poised to get it. But if I see it from me, I don't see a particular hindrance to this growth, but it will not be automatic either. I think the critical thing for me is managing the technology is still something we might have to master a bit more, and learn from leaders like you and bring some more leadership from you. I just saw a news article somewhere the couple of days ago that are people willing to come back to India to make the India the new hub. Having stayed outside, and many of you have been outside as well, it's not as easy as it sounds, because it's not an individual decision. There are a lot of implications of doing that. But from a talent perspective, I think demography is to me an unconnected battery, right? You can have a lot of good demography, but a trained, skilled demography is something that I think will be a very crucial factor in all this that we have said. Because in the end, we have to deliver more things than execution, the decisions, the choices, the technology choices that we need to make. So I think talent will still remain a big, positive challenge. Let me put it that way.
Thanks, Sudhindra. I'll go back to Narendra.
Yeah, sure. I think I was on mute. So just taking forward from the earlier panelists, yes, definitely lead time problems are much in control. I mean, some lead time topics here and there, but it's more of a normal situation now, and that is a good news. Different applications, I think earlier panelists talked about. The size of the industry today is about 600 billion as of 2024 expected, somewhere in that zone, and 1 trillion plus in the next 5 years. So definitely multiple applications are coming in: generative AI, data centers, 5G, renewable energy, and many others. E-mobility is another trend which is coming up. So applications will keep coming. Power hungry, high power density applications especially are gearing up. So technologies are also moving towards silicon carbide, gallium nitride, wide bandgap applications. So this trend will continue in a very strong way. So as far as global demand is concerned, it will continue to be strong. India also looking good based on the recent analysis that IESA report has already predicted. This should be, a good next 5 years for India. Typical trends: global supply chain resilience will continue to be a big challenge. I think earlier members already mentioned about it. This is one industry which was already a globalized industry, no one particular country, but there were pockets of concentration. Even that is getting spread now for the risk management or other issues. Now, semiconductor is more looked at as infrastructure and national security resource by many countries, especially the Western countries. I think India has also now started pushing hard because of the realization of this factor, that it will ultimately boil down to infrastructure buildup and national security. Gen AI is going to be the big driving portion. Navigating geopolitical tensions, fast scalability, new capacities versus adding to existing capacities. Some of the companies, including ours, face this dilemma because there is a thought process of achieving more economies of scale. So whether to spread the plants or keep building in the same plants and increase the capacity, sustainability, develop diverse workforce, training, all these are the topics that are going to be critical. And as the technology is moving towards 5 nanometer, 3 nanometer, we talked about, Haral talked about what's happening with Intel and in US. I think most of those investments are going into US, probably will also move to Europe. Obviously, the costs are very high, 20 billion plus investments in one fab itself. So that's going to be the trend. So government's participation will be also key. Friendshoring versus offshoring, we all know that's another trend which is now taking place. Earlier, it was just put it to the low-cost place. Now, definitely there is a trend to put it to friendshoring kind of a category. And I talked about national security dimension. So these are a few things which are going to be very, very critical. The trends which are going to further drive urbanization is key, climate change, digital transformation, resource scarcity. These are all other areas where we see that this will be driving microelectronics demand in a big way. Lastly, we talked about US, and I think Herald commented about it. So yeah, the news is coming big way. TSMC as well as Intel, I think Apple also, and so on. They are talking about 10 fabs in US, 7 in Europe. Asia Pac also big number. Korea is talking about 500 billion investments. TSMC all investing $100 billion, and so on and so forth. So all these are mind-boggling numbers. India will have to work its way through these big numbers. Actually, the start looks good. Last time when we had this discussion in this group, I'm not sure how much confident we were, but now with the fab coming in and ATMP also coming in and so on, and government really concentrating on the efforts, I think it looks good picture for India overall. Yeah, that's my quick summary on this topic.
Thank you, Narendra. Let me go to Rajiv next.
Okay. Thanks, Mayank. I think overall, most of it, the advantage of being the last is that most of things are covered. But then at a top level, if you see the semiconductor consumption in the country is around $27 to $28 billion currently in India, and this will grow and touch $100 billion by 2030 for India, which means that by 2030, we will be 10% of the overall semiconductor market, global semiconductor. So that means we will become substantial consumers. So far we're kind of in low single digit. So 10% is pretty respectable, and then this will further grow and accelerate. So which means that we as a country have a good opportunity to ride the wave. I think currently as the semiconductor industry is very, very soft. I think the numbers are reflecting that way. So the reason why the lead times have come down drastically is because the demand for semiconductors has come down in last year and a half. So it's in a way good because it gives an opportunity for people like Intel, people like TSMC to ramp up quick with respect to the manufacturing, so that the next wave of semiconductors, as you know, it is a cyclic business, not really cyclic, it's a sinusoidal business. So I think we will be, with the kind of capacities which are coming globally, I think we'll be able to catch the wave, and we will not end up in a similar situation what happened during COVID, when the demand for consumer applications went up and certain areas like automotive went down, and we see people struggling because the factories were not kind of able to make right choices. So you had a huge demand of consumer applications, while as the automotive suddenly went down, and then people had to shift production from automotive to consumer, and that's where the whole world was grappling with lead times. And then the semiconductor started growing, so you had multiple problems. So I think that's probably which led to the high growth of fabs. Even for example, TI, we will be, we in the next year to 2 years, we will have doubled our manufacturing capacity. And most of these capacities were kind of planned much before COVID. So it means that we had already planned for this before. So that's why we are probably ahead of the curve in terms of be the first one to increase the capacity, which means that we are pretty much sure the semiconductor, it may be 1 year, maybe 2030, we may not touch 1 trillion, but maybe 2031, 2032. But then the growth is on the right track. Now coming to India in particular, I think what I see is a good opportunity, and the way we have done it is pretty good. So we started with $10 billion of government subsidies for semiconductors. And what I hear is that this is probably will get doubled once this $10 billion gets exhausted. I think it's in the process of getting exhausted. So which means that India is not unlike many countries around the world, where the incentives were kind of one-time incentives, but then India is planning to continuously increase the incentives for bringing semiconductor manufacturing in the country. And the good part about the whole thing is we have a brand like Tata's, which is really bullish. We have heard from the chairman itself how he wants to take semiconductors in the country, and he has been able to get the right talent and all the experienced talent, not only from Taiwan, not only from US and Europe, so which is really a good trend, mostly expats, because luckily Indians are everywhere managing the factories, managing all these technologies. They have been able to get the right people across the globe, and right now training 1,000, 2,000 people for their OSAT in Assam. So I think India, because of the availability of talent, because of the huge pool of engineers what we get, and people still, unlike Europe and US, where people are slightly shying away from STEM, we are still gravitating towards STEM. So I think India will have a big role to play in terms of making available the skilled people, not only for India. It's a good opportunity that we will be exporting a lot of people from India, which will go and help not only the Indian manufacturing fabs, but also the global manufacturing fabs. So India will play a critical role overall in the overall growth of semiconductors. That's it. I stop here. If you have any questions further on this, I would be love to articulate them. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajiv. We'll come back with the follow-up questions a little later. I think we move to the next section, moving our focus to, say, India, after talking about the global scenario. The current geopolitical landscape offers unique opportunities for India. I mean, that there's no doubt about it, to strengthen our position, in the global semiconductor market. And despite historical limitations in manufacturing innovation, there's potential for India to leapfrog into a competitive position. Now, the question is, what are the strategic advantages we can leverage and how we can address the gaps in our capabilities? I will invite the panelists. I have, a few other questions. For example, what opportunities does the current semiconductor geopolitics present to India? As Harald and Manoj also mentioned earlier, that it's not the chip shortage, but the geopolitics certainly is going to drive this semiconductor spreading, manufacturing is spreading around the world. And without much of the semiconductor innovation, happened in the past, or hold on the technology, we are still relying on, technology to be licensed from other players. Do you think India can still get into the race? And keeping that in mind, what aspects are in favor of India and how India can contribute to the global push? So on this note, let me go back to Partha first, and then I will talk to Manoj.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, great points for the previous section. During the COVID, I think the supply chain was interrupted. More than the supply chain itself, I think the biggest positive outcome has been the awareness in general of the importance of the semiconductor overall supply chain, right? And today it's almost seen at par with either nuclear power or oil or space. It's really as strategic. And the good thing is, this is increasingly, this awareness is spread across the general population as well. People have begun to understand that it's an important piece of the puzzle if you want to be technologically relevant. India, of course, we have a lot of things in favor at the moment. Almost all the semiconductor companies, key semiconductor players, are already present, right, in various ways, and there is a strong coupling to their home headquarters, or however we can call it, in terms of the technology itself. So in many ways, even though we are design focused, there is a big familiarity with what is the technology behind it. There's a reasonably good familiarity there. We also have another important point. We have been having a very good IP record, right? I mean, we have been able to protect them, keep them. We are it's touch wood, but we have really had it's a very important part of the puzzle of developing, maintaining, protecting IPs, and we have had a pretty nice record there. We have a very young population. It's probably one of the unique countries in the world with large population as well as a very young demographic. And on top of it, the diversity is kind of built in, right? I mean, by construction, there's so much of different types of thinking, thought processes in the society here. So that adds to the overall richness of the different types of solutions that needs to be available in this space. And from a technology standpoint, I think it was pointed out, we are increasingly moving into heterogeneous computing in various ways. Almost the semiconductor has been scaling in a certain way for some years, and then there is Moore's law, more than Moore, other than Moore, whatever, different types of variations there. But the bottom line is the entire semiconductor space continues to be very exciting, right? It's still as exciting as it was 20, 30 years ago. So many more opportunities, so many more possibilities of influencing the computation, how we do the compute, how we connect the different parts. So we have a lot of, let's say, almost new paradigms that are to be put in place as we go ahead. So I think the opportunities are almost as unlimited as they were a couple of decades ago. And this is, of course, as it was pointed out, AI is a big, let's say, it has a big influence on how things are shaping up. It will continue to be, it's kind of an unstoppable force. It's evolving in various ways. Everybody is pumping in their investments to grow in different aspects. Similarly, if you look at the sustainability point of view, EV and other new trends are emerging in various ways. These are, again, setting the tone for new demands for semiconductors in general. And India, even in the past, we have a great history of leapfrogging some of the technology, right? Mobile is a great example, right? We are today the best, one of the nations with the, let's say, the cheapest data availability all over the place. And there's no reason we cannot emulate these kind of achievements in the semiconductor segment as well. And coupled to that, I mean, all of that is of no use if we don't have a strong appetite for these services and goods within the country. And this is also having a big upswing, right? If you look at the latest technologies, I mean, almost everything is a technology-based service, be it Swiggy or be it Flipkart or Blinkit, whatever type of industry that's coming up. Almost everything is exclusively technology-based, increasingly AI-based as well. All these are precursors to needing far more technology, and of course, to have it more cost-effective, locally sourced technology is much better there. So that these are points in favor of why the prospects look great for, let's say, semiconductors to be in full swing within the country, the whole ecosystem. Right. The fab and production is a great start, right? Micron has been at the forefront of it, starting with the OSAT thing in Gujarat. There are other, now there is Tata coming up with the chip manufacturing and OSAT. But all said and done, and through the decades, the entire semiconductor system has been driven by the R&D, right? We need to have a very strong R&D system in order to be able to be getting into that production phase. So it's a strong coupling that's needed. And this is today, I would say, not so great. I mean, we will discuss this in a later section as well, but it's a great opportunity. We have the good talent base. We have very good institutions. We have great faculty. So there is nothing really preventing other than let's say, the mindset to be put in place, and possibly much more strong collaboration with between industry, academia, government, and of course the startup ecosystem as well, right? That's booming in the last few years. We have seen it; it's booming, and this presents another avenue of how it can feed into the overall semiconductor ecosystem. So these were the few thoughts I had on this topic, Mayank.
Thanks, Partha. I would actually go to Narendra and Sudhindra and then Rajiv and request them if they want to add something, say in a minute. So we start with Narendra maybe.
Yes. Can you hear me? Sorry,
Yeah.
I was on mute. Yeah. So I think extensively covered already, but just to add a few points there. Again, looks very promising for India overall. We already have a great ecosystem for chip design, almost $33 billion revenue in that domain. 3,000 chips are churned out by India and more than 20,000 engineers. So this will consolidate here also. Design linked incentives and so many other focus areas government has been pushing. There is a plan to develop about 85,000 engineers, if I am correct, in the coming few years and so on. So this should consolidate in a big way, and this strength of India should continue. China Plus One SCM diversifications initiatives is now irreversible. People will continue to broad base. I think that came up in our earlier discussions also. So that will be a big plus for India. We need to really keep focusing on this chip design ecosystem, university programs, and also really upgrade now to product design ecosystem. There is a ecosystem, but then it needs to be much bigger. How Taiwan, China, and all of these countries really prospered in this area is by designing and manufacturing products in the country. I think we are still behind on this. Hopefully this accelerates. Startup, all the initiatives are really looking good, and that should really help, again, fast forward this area. We should continue to have, Rajiv just mentioned about it, local demand growing consistently. And that is one thing which attracts many of the global players. When there is a real local demand growing, that becomes in itself the incentive to come in and invest into the country. So hopefully that will also be a big plus for India in the coming years. As far as what India can contribute to the overall global push, so rightly for manufacturing, now right steps have been taken. 28 nanometer looks to be sweet spot around which the manufacturing is starting the current fabs and so on. Helps to reduce the cost also, and that could be the demand right now for local India electronics industry. And then, of course, we can always go further to lower nanometer range and so on. Products also, they have been talking about power management, MCUs, display drivers. So there is a conscious effort to identify what kind of nodes and what kind of products will be required for India from government side, and the identification seems good right now. So the current manufacturing setups which are coming in, I think they look very much relevant and good for Indian industry also, as we see it from the electronic industry point of view. And hopefully then there is only a question of, once the ecosystem starts building, then it's a question of scale up and upgrade. Thanks.
Thank you. Sudhindra?
Yeah, very shortly, two points you had mentioned, Mayank, about the without much of the semiconductor innovation or hold on the technology. I think this is a very crucial point for me, because I think it was Harald who mentioned about one, the lack of time that we have, even though there is a lot of effort around building the competence. I think that applies to us even more because the learning curve, I don't think we have a choice of a slow learning curve at all. I don't know what is the solution, but the regular learning curve and let it take its own course is not an option. So I think that's a very big, important thing. And the subsequent question you had about how can we help how can India contribute to this global push? I think it's coupled to the other point that we had the execution prowess of the last 30, 40 years in the application of a system on chip, for example, but turning that into designing or defining a roadmap, I think that will chart its course in a very different trajectory for us. So I think these are the 2 points that I wanted to mention.
Thanks, Sudhindra. Very rightly pointed out about the luxury not having the time for learning curve. I'll come back on this. Maybe Rajiv in the end on this section.
Yeah, I think overall India is probably investing in the right thing, while the whole world is talking about 3 nanometer and going below. I think we're focusing on 28 nanometer. I think I see a big opportunity when the whole semiconductor market will grow. There will be shortage in that technology node. And I think I'm pretty sure that Tata's investing to 28 nanometer is a big step in the right direction, because they will focus more on automotive, industrial, and power management ICs. And that's where a lot of local demand as well as global demand may become a concern because of non-availability of such technology loads globally. Maybe in China we have, but then because of the political realignments, we probably may gain a lot. So that's one part of it. And then the second is the OSAT. For example, Micron setting up the OSAT facility is a big, we need to ensure that they really become successful. I'm sure they will, but I think the whole government is working on that they should become successful, because then they become brand ambassadors for the rest. It's like similar to what TI did when we came to India way back in 1984, when there was hardly any multinational coming in India. Today, TI does more than 40% of the designs. Product definition actually happens out of Bangalore, which is phenomenal, right? 40% by less than 3,000, 4,000 people is phenomenal, which means that we have the right talent, and if we invest in the right direction, we can make a big impact, not only for India, but globally as well. I stop here.
Thank you. So let's move to the next section, India's strength and weakness. I mean, India's journey in semiconductor sector is not without its challenges, yet our strengths are equally formidable, and some of these points were addressed in the previous section. We need to look beyond our established design centers and consider how we can build a comprehensive ecosystem that includes manufacturing and innovation. So understanding our core strengths and weaknesses is very crucial for strategic planning. I have some few questions along these lines. For example, what are India's core strengths when it comes to the semiconductor industry, and how we can leverage them effectively? How, we are talking about beyond design centers. Also, without homegrown technology, what are the significant challenges or weaknesses that is hindering India's progress? As you know, R&D is the lifeblood of semiconductor industry. It's a technology and research intensive sector. So how does India's capability fare when compared to the global leaders, particularly when it comes to semiconductor technology R&D? We have not been at our toe compared to the rest of the world. And what future technology innovation should India focus on, to maintain the competitiveness? One thing which I have always told the policymakers that, you have to think of jumping the roadmap. I mean, everything in silicon is possibly done and dusted. So think of jumping the roadmap. Think of what is going to lead the future after 10 years. And last question would be, how can India secure a prominent position among other semiconductor nations? So on this, let me first go to Pradeep.
Sure, Mike. So I think our core strengths are well established over 4 decades of success of Indian talent all around the world. Our graduates from our universities here have gone any corner of the world in semiconductor industry or even other industries and succeeded. Well, so that goes to show that we have very robust academic institutions that prepare us for what world needs, not just India, right? And now the occasion has come to the doorstep, which is icing on the cake. The demographic dividend that we have, right? We have significant percentage of our population that is youth, and that is a very unique advantage that we have over probably any other nation in the world. And if not now, when? That's the question. So this is really the right time to be at the right place with the infrastructure that is needed, and those are our core strengths. Government has also really taken very proactive steps to provide the incentives for entrepreneurs and investors to look into making India foray onto the global stage. We are seeing all the right indicators. Well, the question doesn't have the areas of the weakness, but I would like to just point out a couple of them. I think talent is our forte, attitude is our shortcoming. Most of our talent has been conditioned for last 3-4 decades in India to be wanting an employment rather than going and creating an employment. Most of our talent is in a captive GCCs or captive design centers, where there is even a social reputation associated with which company you work for, right? So for startup companies to attract the talent, right? And that too for our indigenous Indian startup companies to attract the talent, it is a huge challenge, and to switch the mindset of our youth that's going to be graduating from wanting a job to creating a job, to go into a well-paying job and claim a social status, to say, hey, I'm going to take a risk and maybe come out way ahead down the road, but it's on my conviction, right? So I think those are some of the areas. The other area where we have a huge strength is today, one of the hottest things that we talk about as a technology area is electric vehicles, EVs. And in late 1990s, we had designed and manufactured and exported to 26 countries the electric vehicles out of Bangalore, right? And that's our old Reva from Maini Group, which subsequently got acquired by Mahindra. There were no incentives by the government. There was no hype. There was no awareness, but it just took a sense of mission to make it happen, right? So we have this kind of great success stories that are our core strengths. The challenge is that how do you harness them into this newer domain that is going to be the semiconductor. Now, the semiconductor industry have gone through these phases where the major push happens with a newer technology application that emerges. So if you look at from old satellite communication days to telecom, semiconductor industry grew. Then from telecom, we moved to the communications and wireless technologies. Again, it grew further. So as the reach of the usage of the semiconductor devices in form of cell phones, in form of computers, the wider the usage, the more the demand. And I think with AI coming into the picture, there is not going to be any country in the world that's going to be left untouched by AI applications, because it doesn't require you to have your own factory. You just at a fingertip or a laptop or a cell phone. And I think that AI is going to drive semiconductor to even a greater heights in terms of consumption, in terms of and in terms of manufacturing, right? And can we as a nation go from being a nation of being a market to a nation of products? Most of the multinational companies utilize India talent to solve the problems of the world and handsomely pay us for it, right? But can we look? But there is hardly any entity that, except few in automotive, that actually looks at India pain points of the consumer and develop technology solutions at India price point. And if we can really, and that is a completely unattended segment in many fields, from agriculture to automotive. Our problems are very different than the world. And there is a huge potential if we can develop the right solution. So I think the strength is that that we have quite unexplored avenues ahead of us to foray into product definition, productization, and then get ready to utilize the fabs that would be set up down the road to really be able to fill them with our own capacity, with our own demand to be a local supplier, rather than again be a service industry to a captive brand name that is just manufacturing for somebody else, right? So I think our journey will be a full circle the day our graduates step out and want to be an entrepreneurs. They go out and look for Indian problems to be solved with electronics and develop those solutions at an affordable price point, turn into a huge volume ship orders for the chip industry, that then finally the Tatas and the Microns and others actually take on manufacturing them in India for the consumers in India. I think that would complete the cycle. Everything is aligned. The matter is to move forward and execute. And I think when I look at the EV example, I see a lot of hype now, but I don't see us remembering our own success often. And I feel very inspired by our Reva story from Bangalore and India particularly. So I feel pretty bullish, but I think we will require quite a bit of mindset changes for our younger generation.
Thanks, Pradeep. The mindset change was also talked about, Partha, but more from the country context, and you also talked about mindset change, from the talent context. I'll come back to this and ask some of the other panelists their view on this and how do we address it. But let me go to Partha next to talk about India's strengths and weaknesses.
Hey, yeah, so I think Pradeep covered it pretty well, right? Just to add some more things here. I think today we are riding on a good set of policies and a government intent. I think it's a strong point, actually. The way these policies are framed have a lot of thought behind it, right? It's not an impulsive thing. It's really looking as if there's a big intent behind, and they understand the complexity of having this ecosystem going. One of the important thing, I wouldn't call it weakness, but just to be as a caution that these things need to be kind of permanent. It cannot be like today there is a buzz and we are coming here and tomorrow it dies out, right? And this has happened in the past. There has been many spurts of semiconductor initiatives that has never taken off. This should not be the case. It should be something more permanent and much more sustained over a period of time. These things take, I would say, at the minimum in the time frame of decades to evolve, right? When it's not a 1 year, 2 year thing. So we need to be there for some time. That's a big onus on the part of the policymakers and all of us, in fact, okay, all of the stakeholders. Coming to then the other part is, I think somewhat related, the system design, right? I mean, like what you mentioned, Pradeep, and there are many other examples of how we had fairly good system design in the country earlier. I'm just thinking like, Onida, BPL, and all those kind of guys who are actually making their own things. Today, we have almost nothing there at system design. We are just let go of all those things and kind of thought that outsourcing is our way out, but finally, it's not really the solution. So I think this, again, plays to having a long-term intent. We need to be there because this is, you cannot have it as a piecemeal and a temporary fix here. And somewhere feeding this kind of thing and talking about the mindset, another angle of this is also the kind of, let's say, the problem-solving approach that we need to have. And we are great at, in general, if you look at the evolution of Indian technology industry, right? We were very great at IT. Then we evolved into design. So anything which we have a laptop in front of us, we do great, right? I mean, as long as software and related things. The moment we got to interact with hardware, bring things there, and we are not so great, okay, if I can say that. We are able to maybe operate it, we are able to work with it, but if you have to come out with new thoughts, new ideas, have a combination of, a lot of innovation into these kind of things, we are still not there. So that's where there is a role of how our academicians can step up on top of the fairly excellent talent we build to also bring out this kind of mindset. It can involve a lot of training, which is very targeted and in a slightly upgraded approach, I think, to be able to have this kind of talent pool available. And we are talking, again, like a multi-year thing, right? And then the other thing I see is also it's linked to the global emergence of semiconductor as a whole. And somewhere, this I think all of us face in our respective industries, compensation will play a role. What is it going to be? Right? I mean, we are able to have an Indian type of compensation, but the person is, let's say, globally, they are going to have the same skill set and the talent that's needed by everybody in the world. So how are we going to step up in terms of compensation? What's going to be the engineering cost? This is something we got to keep in mind. And there's not proposing a solution, but I'm just saying there's something to look at as well. So these were the few points, Mayank.
Thanks, Partha. I would actually go to Manoj and Sudhindra next, but with a pointed question. Manoj, you have been to Taiwan and US for almost 20 years. So I've seen the developments there. Partha and a couple of other people talked about the mindset change. What mindset, particularly if we talk about the mindset of the talent, what mindset, do you see there? And in context of that, what mindset change do you suggest in the Indian context, both as a country as well as talent?
Yeah, that's a that's a good question. So if you look at, I will talk from the foundries perspective because I'm not experienced in design side. The foundry side, if you look at foundry, there are various components that leads to success to the foundry. The first is the innovation, the other is the talent, and so on. On top of that, uh, there is another factor which is called like a manufacturability or the manufacturing excellence. So if you look at the Indian market or Indian context, I would say India do not have enough experience in terms of semiconductor manufacturing. And it is very obvious that we do not have that culture built as or versus the other part of the world. And that culture itself is something different than any other manufacturing. For example, if somebody is building a home and buying a steel or cement, simply can go and shop it and then done deal. In case of semiconductor, it doesn't happen. If any of the fabless company reaches to foundry, that is the starting point of their engagement, and then foundry has to walk all the way to the end goal of their customer or the fabless company until they launch their product in the market. And so what that means is foundry has to do a partnership with the fabless company or whoever uh, is a part of a customer to the foundry. So that kind of mindset is the first requisite for getting a success in terms of this foundry business. Apart from that, the foundry business is no longer simply a manufacturing industry, but it is kind of a service industry. This is another aspect of a foundry people many times overlook. And when we think about the service industry, I mean, it is like you are serving your customer to make sure what they are doing right, and at the same time, you need to make sure that at every step you need to be there with them to lead to their success. So this kind of mindset we need to build, and it won't get developed overnight. It has to start somewhere, and then over the time, we will be in a position to reach to that level basically. So this semiconductor manufacturing is altogether different kind of a manufacturing mindset as compared to any other manufacturing. That's what I learned from all these my stay in various part of the world. Let's say Taiwan or even South Korea. I spent 2 years, and then US. I hope I answer your question.
Thanks, Manoj. Before I move to the next section, I would request Sudhindra to answer in one line. One of the panelists talked about, captive mindset of Indian talent, and you have also served, in IEEE leadership roles, which means you have interacted with a lot of talent and young minds in the country. What is your idea to address, a change in this captive mind in the current talent pool that we have, or the young pool that we have?
Thank you, Mayank. I think that's a very crucial thing, because throughout this discussion, what I also realized is today we are looking at ER&D center hub as India, but it's most of that is the captive part, right? So I think that gives them a cushion to continue what they are doing. But when we're looking at the scale at which we are thinking the semiconductor coming in and changing, I think it also goes back to the mindset discussion that, yeah, it's the uncertainty versus the the contribution that people would look at. When I look at the Gen Z people or Gen Y kind of a people, they're very, yeah, maybe it's a little bit judgmental, but they're quite, from the feedback I have got, is that they're more short, medium term. And I have no problem with that. But the answer to your question lies in how many of them want to coast their career versus take charge of their career. I think that will make a huge difference, Mayank, if we were to get those people to take up roles, because being comfortable with being uncomfortable is not something we are naturally inclined to. We would rather choose our comfort zone than not. So I think that would be a biggest hurdle to cross, to get these people who are in good, nice, comfortable jobs to, come and do something that they have never done before.
Thanks, Satyendra.
Well, if I may just add, I'll keep it to two sentences. The purpose of all activities at the end of the day is favorable economic outcome. And for India, for us, even looking at my own ancestral journey, we economically move upward generation to generation. We invest in our children's education. They do better than us. We have expectations on them. Right? So this has been our generational journey of growth. And I think now the challenge is presented to us as a culture, that do we want to go into the mode of wealth transfer through an engagement, or wealth creation and share through one's own effort, right? And there, I think colleges would need to take up, and of course, with SAFAL and other startup accelerations, we are seeing unicorns come out. I think that there needs to be awareness built around successes that startups provide, and the build-up. I think our Tejas is a great example in the country, and so on. But I'll just pause here. But I think that wealth transfer to wealth creation, I think that is the key gap, and sort of like a cultural trend that we'll have to break somehow.
Thanks, Prasad. I'll come back to you once again in the next section, but let's move to the next section. It's about the semiconductor policies and initiatives in India. As you know, government initiatives and policies play a pivotal role in shaping the landscape of industries, particularly in the sectors which are complex and resource incentive, like semiconductor. And with ambitious policies like the India Semiconductor Mission, we aim to accelerate our entry and growth in this space. However, the effectiveness of these policies and the real impact on the ground, is always a subject of debate, and one has to evaluate how effective these policies are. There are several gaps which I would like to be addressed as part of this section, and I would like this section to be even more pointed. Though we have, in the previous sections, we have presented all the good things about what's happening in the country and around the world. Some of the questions I want to pose are, for example, what role the current government initiatives and financial incentives like the India Semiconductor Mission are playing? Do you think the current incentives are really effective? I want you to also comment on the timelines and the rate at which things have moved. And if yes, if they are effective, then why don't we see more fabs getting announced? Other question would be, do you think these policies are supporting innovation? Innovation is one important aspect. We can always become a manufacturing country, but if we want to become an innovation-driven company, or a country which is owning the technology, then we need efforts on leading, edge or cutting edge nodes or future nodes in future. What measures do you think, both from government as well as private, are required to encourage and empower semiconductor technology startups? I think there were some discussions earlier, particularly problems identified from the talent side of view, but I think the startups, particularly deep tech startups and semiconductor startups, which are more, capital intensive, they face a lot more challenge than software startups. And last would be, do you think the semiconductor industry in India is innovating enough? I know there are a lot of questions, but I want you to take not more than 2 minutes and be very pointed. And, I hope you don't feel shy from, commenting on the real gaps that we currently have in the country. I'll first go to Prasad and then to others. Prasad?
Yeah. So when it comes to the India Semiconductor Mission, I think its focus is very much clear, right? So we need to upstream the value chain for the semiconductor fabs, and then ensure that there is a momentum and success. When it comes to the fab stuff and all, right? So there is also one important thing people need to take care of is the manufacturing of these electronic components. There is also one more policy which is coming up, the specs, and also the policy also include some of the R&D facilities with IIT Bombay and IISc and all. So these things are pretty much focusing on the next generation semiconductors, packaging and all. But one gap which we see is how these companies can meet this ESG, that is environmental, social, and governance standards. So these things are pretty much clear. So if you go back to the history of Taiwan's success, it is not a 1 day or a 5 years kind of a program. 3 decades, they did a diligent work to become a leader or a global center for this IC production stuff and all. And after that, if you see the South Korea and China, the time has pretty much come down. And for India, so there is no need to reinvent the wheel. So first thing, okay, which to be clear from the government side is what is the role of this technology partner in a semiconductor fab? And if you see the 3 announcements which we saw, right? What is the role of this technology partner? Is it just the licensing the technology and all? But how much is their participation into the fab? And or is it only the technology transfer? These things are pretty much to be more clear so that it will be more encouraging for the other players to come forward. And also in semiconductor industry fab, right? So yield plays a major role, and how we can pretty much, if there is any low yield in production stuff and all, low profit, and that is not an encouraging kind of a situation. And another question which will come from the policy, what is the right node? I saw a few people said, okay, 28 nanometer stuff and all. And do we need to see a good demand in that? And what are the target end market which we need to see and all? And how long these people survive if you take a long-term profitable growth are they getting? And do we have a ROI? I think these things to be there in this particular policy framework. And the next thing is the ecosystem, right? And it is very much challenging. Be it, okay, can we able to provide the electricity, water, and the talent with a dedicated success and all in a long term? Those things, I think we need to look into it. And the supply chain, right? So there is a global supply chain, and we always see that, okay, how they can make a long-term maintenance operation stuff. And there are a few companies who are already started working on setting up their manufacturing units to support the ecosystem and all. But is it enough? And how we can see a long-term success in this? And many of us already mentioned that, okay, talent and then IP generation stuff and all. And most of the hiring, so if we see talent, it is very much software focused and chip programming and all. It is more on the software oriented. And Harold and Parth are already mentioned on this particular ecosystem and talent. And we need more manufacturing skills. Software is not a substitute for the semiconductor manufacturing. I think these things are pretty much we need to. I'll cover more on that next session. So when the talent thing comes up, but so we need to have to be successful. We need to have some kind of a 100 days agenda, right? The India chip portfolio to be developed. Then it gives a kind of a momentum. And also we see that there should be a task force for the chip portfolio program with some kind of a strategy report in 4 months. So those things will create some kind of a momentum. In the players, we are already there, the 3, and also it will also help others to penetrate into it. And with 3, I think it is just a startup, right? I think we need more partners to come in this particular semiconductor journey. So if you see that in next 100 days, if you see 2 additional semiconductor industry projects are announced, that will really create a kind of a momentum in this particular journey and all. So we have policies, we have and all. But at the same time, so if you see the earlier journeys by Taiwan and all, it's like 100% subsidies. Be you take a semiconductor fab or a display fab. So there is a much more kind of, right, they're safeguarded with the government policy stuff and all. I think maybe we also need to look more into it to be more successful in that particular thing and all. And also the next thing is on the talent. So if we need to make a semiconductor engineer versus a software engineer, software engineer talent is it is enormous. I think we have very good success stories, and our software people are very much talented, and we have from the IITs, IISc and all. But thing is, how we can create a semiconductor engineer, it takes at least 8 years for a person from a student to a good semiconductor equipment or a fab maintenance engineer and all. Because we have the plasma, we have to do the control stuff, RF, and then the toxic gases, how to maintain that, and vacuum technology. I think these are all entirely new things for India. And to develop that kind of an ecosystem and talent, it takes a lot of time. And also, we are not so much used to the contamination and the special process and cleaning stuff and all. I see that. Yeah.
Later, Prasad.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the points. I was hoping that we have more pointed responses, identifying the gaps, but thanks a lot for posing more questions. I'll move to Sudhindra, and I would request Sudhindra, with all the experience he has, if he can, answer some of the questions I posed in a very pointed way, without shying away.
Sure, Mayank. I think I'll just stick myself to the last question that was, do you think the semiconductor industry in India is innovating enough? I would, with a positive note, I would say no. If you look at how we are looking at innovation, we just to get the basis right up, and the definition of research is that it converts money into knowledge, according to Dr. Nicholson from 3M, and innovation is converting that knowledge back into money. So I think we have a focus on a lot of patents, a lot of publications, and the latest report also says that the patents, one of the indicators of innovation, is led by academia, which is good, but converting them into products is a very different ball game. And then that conversion is where actually the impact is. So I think, are we innovating enough? To a short answer, no.
Thank you, Sudhindra, for being very pointed. Partha, towards the end, I'll come to you. And again, the same questions. And I want you to be also pointed without shying away. Manoj, I'll come back to you without shying away on what are the things that the India need to address.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the thing is the infrastructure as a whole. I mean, a semiconductor, be it R&D facility, especially fab, I think they need a certain infrastructure which has to be very, very, very precise and reliable over a period of time, right? This is something, let's say, for example, TSMC and Micron, they're mastered in other geographies. All of us, all the companies which are the fabs, they're mastered it in different geographies. In India, it's going to be a new thing. We will see how it goes. Wishing really the best of luck for all the efforts. But really, in order to be, let's say, geographically diverse within India, I think many people, many states and many regions need to step up with respect to the infrastructure, be it electricity, be it supply chain of the ingredients, equipment, their support. So there are a lot of things to do there. I hope it's correctly addressed, but I think that's something we have to watch and see. Right. And innovation is something definitely we don't do enough. It's something we got to, it's a little bit in our culture that we, at least within Indian context, we tend to go with guidance and where we don't question too much, right? It's a kind of built-in thing. That's something we got to break. And as we set up shop here, I think it's an opportunity for us to bring in these kind of influences, especially from what you're seeing from other places. And for example, I'm sure all of us are doing it in various ways. We put a strong focus on having innovation, democratized innovation, right? Because there'll always be this couple of people who are very innovative. That's always there in many places. But how do we have large population do that, which is actually, that's going to be what will benefit in the end. And that's something we got to crack it as well. These are my 2 cents here, Mike.
Thanks, Partha. Let's move on to the next section, which was about the next 5 years for the country. And I would like to use this section for posing a very important follow-up question. We have got started somewhere. The country announced $10 billion. There have been a couple of announcements. So I would say that, a major chunk of $10 billion has already been committed. But if you remember in the very beginning, first section itself, Harald pointed out, I mean, Intel alone is investing $80 billion, and then many other companies are also investing of a similar scale. Every company and majority of the countries are investing in semiconductor. And he also pointed out that $80 billion just from the Intel side and all the investment from other companies put together of the scale of a few $100 billion is not enough at all if if the US wants to catch up, say with Taiwan. So if a couple of $100 billion investment in US or say sub $100 billion investment in Europe is not enough to catch up with Taiwan, then how do you foresee catching up with Taiwan in India with only $10 billion? And in that context, how our next 5 years need to be? I will go to Narendra first with this particular question, and then to other panelists.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks. So to quickly cover on this, see where we are and where Taiwan, US, China, Korea all are, we know that there is no comparison, except for maybe the chip design part of it. So it will be the journey which will matter, if you'll ask me, rather than the destination, because I don't think we are going to catch up with these guys in a short span of time. But right steps and right approach is what I think we should focus on. Very quickly, since you talked about these billions of dollars, very quick some numbers. So we just mentioned earlier, from $44 billion, $103 billion is the semiconductor market in next 3 years, since we're talking of the next 5 years we're talking about. And equipment market moving from $188 billion to $404 billion. So these are quick numbers. Now, let me quickly touch these 5 sections of total semiconductor ecosystem. Chip design constitutes about 30% in terms of value. India is doing $33 billion here. I talked about it. 3,000 chips are done here and 20,000 plus engineers. And this will continue to grow based on our current strength, policy initiatives, and so on and so forth. Next is silicon wafer manufacturing, where Japan is 60%. It's just 3% of the overall revenue. Right now, that is not the priority. Rightly so, probably. It can come in later. Chip fabrication tools, the ASML kind of business, is again 15% of total revenue. So there again, rightly, India is not right now going to play. I have heard the minister talking that we want to ultimately play into everything. So probably this may come up later at some stage. 40% of the value chain revenue is fabs. And now that is where we were struggling. TSMC has 12 fabs, if I'm correct, UMC, SMIC. These were all the big guys, Samsung, of course. And now with the first fab coming in, there is a intention to get another one. And then there is a spiral effect expected, as we are expecting. So this is one area where in the next 5 years, we should see progress and push from the government. Again, political will and whatever funding India can do will definitely matter, because without which nothing will move. So far, nothing moved because of the same reason. Last portion is ATMP, 10% of the total value chain, in terms of, again, value. So this is again 15 ATMPs targeted by government. I think 3 are already in with plans and activities started and so on. And I think this is much more reliable for India to do in terms of getting the talent, skill, and investments are smaller and so on and so forth. So this is where I think progress should happen faster. So at this stage, chip design, fabs, ATMP, all the 3 right areas is what India is gunning for, and incremental gains with acceleration from government should happen here. So this is where we see. And in terms of how, beyond this, how to approach, yes, consolidate on the chip design activity, focus on IP generation, EDA, chip design, overall activity, and so on. Manufacturing, we have talked about it earlier, the kind of devices which are required for local market, especially 28 nanometer node, we have talked about. It's not the only one, but seems to be the identified one. And then, of course, then we move up in terms of, lower nanometers and so on and so forth. So knowledge system, very crucial. All these initiatives that government is driving, Make in India, Skill India, they will have to really startup India, all of this, they will have to really categorize specifically for this industry and then really micromanage how this can effectively work. Overall, we know these areas are doing good, but Make in India, as far as semiconductor industry, and then same way, Skill India, startups, etc., can be really micromanaged to keep making it more and more effective. So this is how it looks like for next 5 years. Business should keep growing, manufacturing should keep growing, and then the challenges have to be addressed, whether it is the skill, whether it is other reforms, land, labor, anything and everything that is required. And since your question, Mayank, started with how to match Taiwan, so I think let's not really. I don't think that's the idea. We cannot match them at this stage. We need to start gelling well with the overall ecosystem in all areas of the semiconductor ecosystem, I would say. And once that starts happening, the spiral effect should take care, and India's total pie in this industry should then become much more respectable. And then that's how then the further progress can be charted. Thanks.
Thanks, Narendra. I would like to tap into Manoj's mind. Manoj, if you are there. So, for example, let me phrase the question. Narendra's point is that fab is only 40%, rest 60% is other things, and India can, leverage that 60%, which is kind of a low-hanging fruit, if I can re-articulate the way he explained. But the geopolitics is around that 40%. And that you mentioned, and Harald mentioned in the beginning, that geopolitics is going to drive that push. Even the US and Europe is trying for that 40%, and with hundreds of billion-dollar investment, it's not so easy to catch up. So what is your suggestion for India to, even if not catch up, but how to address the geopolitics, get into the race enough that one can address the geopolitics with little investment or lesser investment compared to what Europe and US are doing?
Mayank, sorry, just interrupting before. I think I was not saying fab is not required. I said fab, chip design, and ATMP with government's help are already coming in, and this should consolidate further. I said wafer and some of the other areas maybe will come later. That's what I meant. Thanks.
Got it.
Thanks.
So Manoj.
Okay, thank you, Mayank. So from our perspective, as a person who is working in a foundry, we always look at a foundry as a center place, and then all the ecosystem built around the foundry in terms of the equipment manufacturers, then the ecosystem related all components, let's say system designs and so on. So the foundry is a core component of this semiconductor industry, and we, even if we say it's a 40%, but it is basically playing a key role for other 60% to get successful. So that is one thing we need to remember. Now, in order to become a complete entire semiconductor ecosystem successful, we need to understand how the foundry works very well. That is a core thing we need to understand first. And from my perspective, we need to understand, or we need to study a lot of failure cases first. Why in the past many of the big semiconductor empires are out of phase of this business. I don't want to name those companies there, but we need to understand how they phase out from this business. Our classic example, SCL, when we look at the SCL starting journey, at that time, we had a technology. At the same time, the US also have a similar type of technology. And then our journey ends very soon. Our semiconductor journey ends very soon, and then the rest of the world catch up very fast. So we need to understand the foundry business dynamics very carefully, and to make it really successful. Now, the foundry business is purely a profit-based business. Unless you don't get a profit, no one can sustain. I mean, none of the foundry can sustain for a longer time. And that's the key. And one has to ensure that how that can happen. So most important thing is the customer engagement. When we keep talking about the domestic markets, India's domestic market, are we sure that this domestic market is going to create a domestic demand? We need to make sure that. And how do we do that? Because unless we convert that market into demand, and especially for the local foundry, it's very hard for the foundry to get succeed. Recently, we have heard the news from China that whatever is their local foundries, who are the semiconductor manufacturers, all the government institutions, educational institutions, wherever the chips which are relevant, and those are manufactured in the local market, they made it compulsory for them to replace all the external companies' chips, and then and then try to create a local market for them. So it's one best example that how the domestic market needs to be converted into a domestic demand. So that's one of the most critical factor that we need to understand. So apart from the failure case studies, we need to also work on this one, and it has a lot of other components. They can play a role. For example, the government, the educational institute, the startup companies, and so on. And we keep painting the rosy pictures in terms of this much billions and this much innovations and so on. But in reality, do we really require that to be successful as a starting point of the foundry? Yes, I understand. For example, if you are working on the leading nodes like 2 nanometer or 3 nanometer, certainly without innovation, nothing will happen. But are we doing that in India? And my answer is no. We are starting a fab of 28 nanometer where a lot of innovation has been already done. What we need is the manufacturing ability to make it successful. And that is the starting point of our journey. So we wanted to make sure that that happens first, and then we can grow on top of it. So I think we need to think about this very seriously in terms of manufacturing. Unless we are not successful from the manufacturing standpoint, this business or this particular activity will not have a sustainable path. So that's my point, man.
Thanks, Manoj.
Yeah.
So we are now at the last segment of our session. And as you know, the success of any industry hinges on the availability and the quality of its workforce. And we have, briefly touched base, and some of the other panelists also talked about talent requirements in other sections. Now, for India to meet this demand of establishing and expanding semiconductor industry, a massive ramp up in talent development is necessary, which is from fostering local talent to attracting, talents from around the world and top, educational institutions. I have actually phrased a few questions around these points. For example, say a fab requires 2,000 to 3,000 engineers, to say the least. It can be even higher for, say, mega fabs. And also that requires, at least 10,000 jobs in the peripheral around the fab. As Manoj was also pointing out, that fab is at the center, at the core, and then all these other activities, or the 60% of the business, is seen around the fab. So, what is your idea to ramp up the talent development effort? I mean, no university, as for example, Harald was also pointing out, that all say majority of the European universities put together, you can't produce more than 1,000 people a year. So what is your idea? I mean, and the same goes with India. So what is your idea to ramp up the talent development efforts? Do you think that fabs in India, whenever they come, will attract the global talent of Indian origin, at least, to come back to India and contribute locally? I mean, we always talk about that, there are a lot of people abroad who are willing to come back when these fabs come, but is it really practical for them to come back? And what will be the driving forces or motivational forces to attract them back home? What would be your advice? I mean, given that the limited number of people will come out from the tier 1 institutes who may, fit into a certain kind of roles, we also have massive talent pool available from tier 2 and, other institutions available in the country. what would be your advice to, say, tier 2 and other tier institutes on developing programs to train the masses in the microelectronics semiconductor area? And how can they contribute to this massive skill requirements the country and the world are expecting? The online or edtech is kind of very fancy. It's easier to scale up. But do you think that the online programs or online way of developing talent can really scale up the talent development requirements for the semiconductor industry? And also, last would be that, do you think the talent shortage in other countries? I mean, can India, for example, become a semiconductor talent nation, that we are not only developing technologies from India, we are also producing enough talent that it can cater to our address to the talent shortage in other countries once it's addressed, of course, for our country as far as the semiconductor is concerned. So on these points, I would request some of the panelists to spend, say, 2 minutes and express their point of view. I would go to Sudhindra first, who has invested a lot of time interacting with young minds. What is your view?
Thank you, Mayank. So when we did a research a couple of years ago on ER&D centers in India, and why we are not able to move up the value chain, because this is moving up the value chain, this whole industry discussion. Only 4% of the people were able to do that. That's what we found in the GCCs. That means to show, like you rightly said, there is something between the tier 2 and the rest of them that is not happening. When I sit in the academic world with the board of studies or so, that the will is there on both sides, of course, on the industry side and on the academia side. But the skill does not come because you have the will, right? So it will not convert itself into skill. A lot of discussions have happened around this academic industry engagement discussions, and I think it's almost beaten to death. The key remains still is there is also a bad news in the way that I interact with students. I get to see is not everybody is into core engineering. Now that creates a very dry pool to start with compared to the number that we are talking about. Second, the faculty piece of this discussion is crucial, because I always say industry people are busy and hence they go to academia for help. And if the academia does not respond, there will be the talent crunch will get worse from there. Now that means the academia cannot demand respect, but have to command respect by saying to the industry, I dare to say that, go to the industry and can you able to find a day in your life to tell them this is what you need to do. I think that's when the tables will turn and the momentum will shift. So I think students are there, but I think there is a lot of things to happen from us. And one quick point on the reverse brain drain that you mentioned, I think I also have seen that from my consulting space, that today's coaches, or the so-called coaches, are semi-retired people mentally. They want to have a good life. They've had the busiest times of their lives, and it's a kind of cooling off period. I don't think we have time to cool off. If at all there is a need at this point of time for this discussion, they might even have to work the Narayan Murthy way. But that's my opinion, but that's where I will stop.
Thanks, Sudhindra. I would go to Pradeep next.
Thank you, Mike. Sudhindra, thank you. Very enlightening, insights. So what I've seen happen in, I would say, last 3 years, particularly, the launch of the C2S program by Government of India, I think that's a fantastic step up, which enables over 113 plus universities to have ED access. So therefore, those students would have industry-ready skills when they graduate. I think that's one big step that really calls for, sincere applause for the government action and the support by the EDA companies to enable talent in that regard. So that's one. Second one, that it has been also a significant change that I've seen, particularly last 18 months to 2 years, is many universities have started beyond the tier 1 or beyond the IITs. Now, many universities have started hosting Center of Excellence as well as innovation hubs on campus, where the industry can put either funds or a program. And this concept of professor in practice has come in existence, which is actually the bridge where it allows the industry folks to really be active in the academia and be in a supportive role rather than a overbearing or disruptive. So I think this has been also a very significant positive change. And thirdly and lastly, when it comes to manufacturing training, right, we don't have as many universities. I mean, we have some of our IITs have nano fabs or fabs. Some of our, and Hyderabad, the University of Hyderabad has that. So there's been, you can count on the finger how many universities can really provide students with a hands-on experience on the semiconductor manufacturing. And this is one idea that I've been socializing, and now we are further along in bringing to the academia. Is to bring an AR/VR 3D virtual reality capability as a training module. And that training module, government can pick and choose and avail it to the universities just the way the EDA has been availed, where students can now, they don't have to worry about having tons of funds to go to Taiwan or go to US universities and get hands-on experience, at least at the first level. I mean, even our pilots do simulator flights to start with, right? And this AR/VR based semiconductor manufacturing clean room experience is a new concept that we are working on to bring into as an add-on to our academia to enable students to have manufacturing insights as part of being on campus, hassle-free, and at least have a first level of understanding towards that. So that's what I would like to add. I feel very bullish. I think our academic system has produced success across the world. We, I think, have made huge strides in the last 3 to 4 years for manufacturing. Government also introduced very aggressively the Bhashini and Bharat GPT and AI mission, which now has percolated to many universities, and universities are really hungry to get into AI as well as semiconductor, which I think is a really good overlap, good intersection. So I feel very bullish, and I think it's not really 5 years. 1985 TI started first with putting a trust in our talent and our geography, right? Infrastructure problems were there at that time also, but it took 20 years for us to emerge as a highly sought after destination. I think this is a 2-decade of journey. I'm pretty confident that by the time 2045 rolls around, we may be in the top 2 or 3 destinations for semiconductor manufacturing in the world. It's a long journey, but we are in the right track.
Thanks, Pradeep. So, I mean, Sudhindra talked about the mindset aspects of the talent, and Pradeep talked about, say, the design side of the spectrum. For example, the design link incentive scheme is kind of helping many universities creating talent around the design side of things. AR/VR, can possibly address the tool hands-on related aspects to a certain extent. But the core of all of this is the fundamental semiconductor device and technology training, which is kind of lacking in the country. Even if you talk about the top master's program in the country, except a handful of programs, majority of the programs are focused around design, circuit design. If you go to tier 2, majority of the programs or even the undergraduate programs of the universities are focused around the design end of things. More efforts are needed in the scale up that I was talking about. I was talking about more in terms of semiconductor technology, development, kind of a training. I would go to Harald and then Manoj and would like to see their comments or their input on how this should be scaled up or how this can be scaled up, given that the core of or the missing part of the puzzle is the training aspect related to semiconductor design, semiconductor technology, process development, manufacturing related aspects, which is quite intensive in its own. Harald, what's your thought?
Yeah, that's a big topic. First, just to clarify, that's not misunderstood. The 1,000 master students was just for Germany, so it's not whole Europe. Yeah. So yeah, the talent education, also the hands-on aspect is very important. Of course, when you want to go into manufacturing, I mean, Manoj already mentioned. Let's say if you have the bigger picture of a foundry business in India, then you need this service part. Yeah. So you need always to think with, and this is not a domain for freshers. No, not people just starting, coming from university. This is really where you need to draw from the experienced workforce in India, and I think it's there. Yeah. So, but focus on the manufacturing side, and this is really a pressing topic we have right now, and a lot of discussion in Europe due to the invest into the manufacturing sites at different locations in Europe. I mean, out of these, whatever, 3,000, let's call it technical people in a manufacturing environment, or in a typical wafer fab, you have 2/3 of them are what I call practical engineering, or practical engineers. You have about 1,000 people who will then do, I mean, the guidance, the steering, the main, decisions for optimizing the process, not necessarily developing. I mean, we have to see R&D is typically done, the pre-development of a technology is always somewhere else. So this is really a manufacturing side is tailored to yield. And this is more the optimization steps. So it's not a lot of, research in the advanced nodes. It's really down to earth, understanding data crashing, understanding details of the steps of the processing. This is the needed skill here. But there's also this workforce, what I call the practical one, operating machines of value of 400 million, taking care of all this data in the first step. So there has to be a good understanding of, let's say, basics of device physics, mathematics, but also the practical skills. And this is a very, very challenging topic, because of course the compensation for this part of the population is different. So now you're in a really difficult situation. You have to have this skilled practical engineers, which are not probably even a master, not PhD, but they are really in this, let's say, lower ranks of engineering, or very skilled technicians in Germany. And this is where a big gap is right now for us. And I think it might be also in other locations, to educate, people perhaps from these tier 2 institutions, that they can start their career in an environment where they can grow then, of course. But they need to understand these fundamentals. It has to come in a way that it cannot be an extended program. It must be a very, condensed program, and helping them to get into job pretty quickly with this base knowledge, but also the hands-on skills. So that's a big problem right now, what we see. And we have no recipe right now. So just talking from our own experience, we are trying to set up local schools where we train them, but this is anticipated to be very hard, because it's also to draw people to these places is difficult. I know about the opportunities. We talked about the online, and I think online training is a good starting point, in combination with some hands-on training, which needs to be provided somehow locally, because those people might not be able to, they're typically not traveling for their education far distance, at least not in Europe. Those kind of people are more local. And then the challenge is, of course, to motivate them to go to these places where the jobs are. This is in Europe probably more difficult than in India. It's just a guess. But I say this kind of the problem we see right now is this kind of population who needs to understand fundamentals, but also have the hands-on skills.
Thanks, Harald. Towards the end, I'll go to Manoj, who is also seeing similar talent crunch in the US. Recently, there are a lot of aspects from TSMC in news, where TSMC had the idea of bringing the talent from Taiwan if there's a crunch in the US. So I would like to ask you, Manoj, and you also talked about the mindset, the manufacturing mindset. So I want to ask you two questions. One is that, how do you think India should ramp up the talent development, um, given the core that is needed? And how do you see the other countries, are particularly US, is also emphasizing more on the talent development and what US is doing, and if there's anything that India can learn from US?
Thanks, man. So first of all, when I look into this foundry business and the new hires in foundry business particularly, it's very similar to a medical education, where, for example, in US, MD courses of 4 years, and then 2 years will be in the college, and then rest of the 2 years will be in the hospital. And in that last 2 years, they get a rigorous training, like on-field training, and they can then go with the confidence for practice. A very similar kind of model I have seen in the universities in Taiwan. I have seen such type of model in Korea. They have a year or two, first 2 years of their PhD program, which are basically spent in the university campus, and then rest of the part of their PhD tenure, they spend mostly in industry, and they have ample scope around the universities to for the students to go and join any industry, and that's where they develop their skill set in rest of the PhD program. So they get hands-on training, they get the real like a market, what market is demanding, what should be the direction of the research, and so on. So that's one part of the PhD program. Uh, they also have the internship programs, which are basically short-term internships, for example, like 2 months, 3 months kind of thing. So mainly those kind of internships are available in the production lines or testing lines and everywhere. So they also engage the master degree students there, and then when they graduate, they are basically ready to join that job, and it's very easy for them to come up to the speed within a 6 months to 1 year, and then they are very productive in their day-to-day work. So this kind of model is currently in Taiwan. Also, similar type of model I have seen in South Korea, and in US mainly we are also like trying to get into that model. For example, like I am hiring a lot of PhD students from last several years, and the first thing I make sure that that student come to me first for the internship. They spend some time. We also understand what is the strength of that student, where we can place, and so on. And then student also is well acquainted with the entire our industry system. And then when that student come back after their graduation, certainly it's very productive. So this kind of model we are following. I don't know what is the right model, but at least what we follow for last 20 years, that's what I could share with you guys. In terms of the online programs, of course, those programs I view towards that as an awareness rather than a knowledge. My personal thought process is it creates a lot of awareness, and that basically attract the talent of that particular interest, and then they join to the mainstream program. So that's how I view towards those online programs.
Thanks, Manoj. So we are now at the end of the session. Before I hand over this to the organizers, let me summarize the key take home. The good news is that the chip shortage is not a real issue or an issue anymore, but the geopolitics will continue to be the issue. Even at the geopolitics end, some of the panelists pointed out that it's a natural demand that things are spreading out. Earlier, there were some concentric hotspots or these focal points where the manufacturing used to happen, but now things will spread out as most of the countries are putting effort. So as things spread out, the geopolitics or the complexity of geopolitics will also become a little relaxed. But it's kind of a interdependent action. So if the countries stop putting their effort, this relaxation of the geopolitics will not happen. So basically, countries have to put the effort so that things spread out. Another important aspect that we learned was, even for US or Europe, $100 billion or money of that scale is not enough for to catch up with Taiwan. So in that context, $10 billion for India is pretty less or lower money. But some of the panelists also pointed out that catching up with Taiwan should not be the goal. The goal should be to get into manufacturing and balance out the geopolitics. And I would also suggest or say that this should be the goal, that rather we say that we will become the third nation or the fourth nation. We should be one of the nation which is helping globally balancing the geopolitics. That should be our goal. To balance out the geopolitics and to get into manufacturing and R&D driven manufacturing, there are various aspects that as a country need to address. One is the mindset change. We have had a captive mindset. The generation after generation, we wanted to find a job and settle down. That has to change. We have to basically become someone who is producing employment, who is producing technology. From the academia side, also, we have to change our mindset that, the money has to convert knowledge, which is, there to a certain extent, but the knowledge is not converting into money. That also need to change, which means that the money has to convert into relevant knowledge, and then only that relevant knowledge will convert into money. From the mindset point of view, we also need to change our approach in terms of getting more into hands-on, something beyond software, more into hands-on, more into R&D driven efforts in the country, rather, cut, copy, paste models, which have been successful in the past in the country. As a country, we also need to basically ensure that we are embarking on jumping the roadmap, rather always playing the catch-up game. One can always play the catch-up game to get into manufacturing, but then at some point we have to jump the roadmap and invest heavily into something which is going to lead the future, say after 10 years. So at least after 10 years, we are into that roadmap, and maybe after 20 years, we are among the leading nations. Also, we don't have the luxury, to play the learning curve or to have the same learning curve like the Taiwan had, which means you can never catch up if you are always trying to catch up into older generations, and that also justifies the need for us to jump the roadmap. And the last and very important point, we talked a lot about talent development. The fundamental thing is, looks like nobody has a clear-cut recipe for talent development, which means a lot more effort and discussion has to happen on how the talent development has to be scaled up. But certainly it is clear that talent development and talent requirement is going to be a global choke point, and India need to put a lot more effort in developing talent and converting our young minds into more relevant talent, which can cater to some of these technology intensive initiatives in the country. On this note, I will hand over this to Avinash, and thanks a lot to this wonderful panel and all the panelists. It was wonderful talking to all of you. We have a lot of good take home, and I hope our policy makers and other stakeholders take some key bullet points from this discussion and use it for good. So Avinash, hand over.
Thank you, Professor, for leading this and steering this discussion. Thank you indeed, everyone, for joining in, taking the time. It was certainly a great learning for us, and I'm sure a lot of people who will be watching this, the depth of experience that each one of you bring certainly is immense. And we as, stakeholders, I think, have a lot to contribute, to really make this, happen. And I think we will keep coming back to you with more such discussions going forward from time to time. And to keep this dialogue on, we actually have a group on LinkedIn known as Technology Game Changers. We will share that link on the chat here and later on, on the mail as well. It'll be good for you to kind of join that group and keep sharing your views on that group. A whole lot of other technologists from other industries are a part of that group, and they continue to share their views there. It's cross-learning, and it's good for one another to kind of take note of that. So, and again, we, like I mentioned, bring in the talent aspect. We are also one of the key stakeholders here to make this happen. Like I said, we're a platform enabling companies to look at talent from global hubs. And we will certainly kind of connect with you to see how we can, engage with you folks in future. Thank you indeed for spending this time with us. Lovely having all of you. Thank you, Professor Mayank, once again.